Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. Whenever there is a high-profile case of gun violence, there is a very predictable cry from the lefties that there needs to be gun control. They often try to disguise this with names like sensible gun reform or buyback programs and, different things like that. But it doesn't matter what you call them. They are all leading to a gun ban. And you may say, but Doug, buyback programs are not gun bans because they're voluntary. Well, this is where you would be wrong. From an article from the Daily Wire and Lemieux, he says that hundreds of thousands of Canadians would face prison time if they do not turn in, that's what I said, turn in their newly prohibited guns under a supposedly voluntary gun buyback program that is testing the strength of Canadians' bureaucratic regime. Since May of 2020, the Canadian government has attempted to institute a massive assault-style firearms compensation program, as they like to call it, that will purportedly trade cash for prohibited guns. If Canadians do not turn in a prohibited gun by October 2026, they could face up to 5 years in prison. Yeah, the program has faced massive pushback from provincial leaders and gun rights organizations who say it will only disarm law-abiding Canadians. Quote, we're finding that they're running into a lot of compliance issues, said Blair Hagan. He's an executive at Canadians National Firearms Association, and he said that they have no idea where the guns are or who has them. So it's proving to be a very, very difficult situation for the government. Due to the scope of the program, the government has extended amnesty 3 times for ownership of one of thousands of banned so-called assault-style guns, though they can't tell you what an assault-style gun is anyway, with the latest one set to expire in October of this year. Well, we can actually thank Justin Trudeau for this. And an order in council rolled out by then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in May of 2020 banned thousands of assault weapons. Even though they can't tell you what an assault weapon is. They can't give you a definition there. And it claimed to offer compensation. This is what they claimed to offer compensation to those who voluntarily turn in their weapons. According to Hagan, an order in council is a non-democratic legal instrument there in Canada, where the Canadian government can ban items like guns without having to take legislation through Parliament. Can you imagine? Yep, you probably better start imagining. Today, the government describes participation in the gun buyback program as voluntary, but that compliance with the gun ban is required. so it's voluntarily required. You're required to be voluntary. Quote, while participating in the program is voluntary, compliance with the law is not. Businesses and individual firearm owners must safely dispose of or permanently deactivate their assault-style firearms before the amnesty period ends on October 30th of this year, or risk criminal liability for the legal possession of a prohibited firearm. This is what the government says on its own website. Now, Justin Davis, the public affairs director of the National Rifle Association, said that it made no sense to call the program voluntary, other than trying to sell it, right? He says, quote, I mean, they call these things voluntary. But if the option is either turn them in or you're going to jail, I would not consider that voluntary. Yeah. So yeah, you have an option. You can either comply with what the government wants you to do, or you can go to jail. You have the choice. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way, type thing, right? Well, the government also doesn't guarantee compensation for turning in the designated weapons, only saying that gun owners who choose to participate in the program may receive compensation subject to availability of program funds. So we might decide to give it to you. We might not. If we have the funds, yeah, maybe. But if we don't, we won't. Well, Carney calls it compensation, not confiscation. Prime Minister Mark Carney, he's obviously the current prime minister right now. He claims that the program, which could penalize gun owners with jail time if they don't comply, was not confiscation. I mean, that's a terrible word. We don't want to use confiscation. He says, this is not about confiscation. This is about voluntary. Let me repeat. This is about voluntary return of firearms for compensation. So I return it to a private person that I bought it from. I'm okay. Well, Carney said during a podcast in September of 2025 that, quote, people aren't going around confiscating guns. Anyone who says that is the mischaracterization. What it is an opportunity for Canadians to return guns for compensation. maybe, if we're feeling good that day. In the same podcast, Carney claimed that the hunting rifles would not be impacted by the extensive gun ban. Quote, we are not talking about hunting rifles. We're not talking about sports shooting or anything like that. We're talking about assault rifles, is what Carney said. Again, not being able to actually give you a definition of that. However, this appears to ignore the fact that there is a specific carve-out for native tribes that use prohibited rifles for hunting. The amnesty includes a temporary exception for Indigenous peoples exercising a right under the Constitution, and as well as those who use firearms for subsequent hunting, which enables them to continue to use their newly prohibited firearms to hunt. It says, if previously non-restricted, until a suitable replacement can be found. Well, not everybody's on board with this up there in Canada. Many Canadian provinces, including Yukon, Alberta, Manitoba, New Brunswick, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, have indicated they will not assist the national government in enforcing the ban. Quote, we will have nothing to do with this program. We will not spend any Alberta tax dollars on this program. This is what Terry Bryant, the chief firearms officer of Alberta, told the CBC News last month. He said, we can't block the federal government from setting something up, but they have to set it up and be appropriately licensed. Well, effectively, what this means is that the feds will be on their own for enforcing the gun ban throughout much of Canada without any assistance from local law enforcement. Quote, if the feds want to try to enforce it, they're going to have to do it themselves. And of course, the logistics get even more just insurmountable, and the price goes up, said Hagen. In the fall of 2025, the Canadian government ran a pilot program of the buyback scheme that ran for 6 weeks and only yielded, get this, 25 guns. Yeah, the whole program yielded 25 guns, probably most of them not even working. Well, the government had reportedly expected to confiscate some 200 weapons, and obviously it fell way short. The government declared the program a success, though. Hey, we got 25 guns off the streets, saying that it showed that, factual, consistent information on how the program works, what individuals can expect if they choose to participate, and legal requirements to comply with the prohibition must be readily available and up to date. Okay. Well, Hagen said that there was not much public appetite for the gun buyback program, but that it was pushed by leftists embedded in Canadians' federal bureaucracy, saying that, quote, that's one of the biggest problems with firearm laws in Canada, he said. There is a civil disarmament agenda in that bureau. It started many years ago. They've done everything they can to ensure that it continues. And at the end of the day, Hagen sees the government's efforts to stop crime and violence by talking law-abiding citizens taking their law-abiding citizens' firearms as illogical, which of course it is. He said, you can put all the laws and restrictions and prohibitions on the law acquisition of ownership of firearms that you want, but it's not going to decrease or eliminate crime or tragedies because criminals and lunatics will always find a way, he said. So you may say, well, but this is Canada, right? Yeah. Well, that sentiment was echoed by Davis with the NRA saying that, yeah, it's Canada, but America has some issues as well. He warned that leftist politicians in the United States wanted to enact similar policies. He said the issue here is the idea that criminals would be turning in their firearms. It's just absolutely illogical, he told the Daily Wire. He says there's no criminal in the world who's going to turn in their firearm for a few dollars and then instead they can use it for perpetuating crime. I mean, during her first run for president back in 2019, Kamala Harris said she supported a mandatory, not a voluntary, a mandatory gun buyback program for so-called assault weapons. Again, something they can't give a definition for. Quote, we have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory gun buyback program, Harris said. It's got to be smart. We got to do it the right way. The word smart coming out of her mouth is just really, really rich. But anyway, Davis said that the Second Amendment gave a layer of just protection to gun owners that those in Europe and Canada didn't have. He said places like Europe and Canada and Australia do not have those types of protections. And you see political figures continue to push more and more gun control laws that, again, just disarm law-abiding citizens and create more soft targets for criminals and evil individuals in this world who want to do harm to innocent lives, he said. A 2024 challenge to Canadians' buyback program lost, but advocates for gun rights in Canada believe that the program will become too expensive to institute and will face a host of just practical problems. Higgins sees some parallels between the current ban on assault-style weapons and the effort to have all long guns registered. That requirement was repealed in 2012 by a conservative coalition and was seen as a major victory for Canadian gun rights advocates. Obviously, part of why it's being very difficult to enact this now because they don't know where all the guns are. The policies could also be overturned if Carney's Liberal Party loses power in Canada, saying, quote, it's one thing to ban a bunch of guns and declare that they're prohibited and state your intention to confiscate them, Higgins said. But it's quite another to actually make that happen. yeah, I would say that's the case. Well, I wanted to get into this a little bit more, and I know we've covered this a few times on the podcast, but it's just so illogical, and many people don't really understand the problems that come with this. They don't understand what why the liberals are saying what they're saying, why they want to do what they do, and they're saying, well, if we can't ban guns, then what can be done, right? Well, David Koppel, who he was writing for the Cato Institute, and he wrote he wrote this just a little over 10 years ago. So kind of keep that in mind because he could have written it yesterday. And I want to share this with you. He says, when policymakers consider steps to address the problem of mass homicide, they should remember that highly publicized and emotionally wrenching events can distort our understanding of risk and what ought to be done about it. Like airplane disasters, for example, get a lot of media coverage. But safety experts remind us that one is more likely to get injured in an automobile accident on the way to the airport than injured in an actual airplane crash. We should similarly acknowledge that mass murders are rare in the United States. The risk of dying in a mass murder is roughly the same as being killed by lightning. Yeah. How many people do you know that have been killed by lightning? And because favorable trends are not considered newsworthy, many people are unaware of some very positive developments since 1980. For instance, the U.S. homicide rate has fallen by over half, from more than 10 victims per 100,000 population annually to under 5. Again, this was written 10 years ago. Accidents involving minors have also dropped. For children 0 to 14, the fatal gun accident rate has declined by 91% since 1950. The annual number of such accidents has plunged from its 1967 high of 598. As of 2013, there were only 69 such accidents. These favorable trends have taken place during a period when American gun ownership has soared, and by the way, has continued to do so. And we'll get into that in a second. But in 1964, when the homicide rate was about the same as it is now, he says, per capita gun ownership was only 0.45 fewer than one gun per 2 Americans. And in 1982, there were about 0.77 guns per capita, or about 3 guns per every 4 Americans. By 1994, that had risen to 0.91, or 9 guns per 10 Americans. And by 2010, there were slightly more guns in America than Americans. So I thought, well, this was written 10 years ago. I would like to know, what the figure is now. And yes, it has exploded from 1 gun per every American. 10 years later, 1.5 guns per every American. I mean, that is an explosion. And a lot of those guns are going to people who have never owned guns before. He goes on to say it would be inaccurate to claim that the entire reason that crime has declined in recent decades is because Americans have so many more guns, but it would be accurate to say that having more guns is not associated with more crime. If anything, just the opposite is true. Policies that seek to stigmatize or criminalize gun ownership the universal background check law that criminalizes loaning a gun to someone's sister, for instance, and have little to do with public safety, except to undermine it, obviously. He says we must also recognize that mass murderers often spend months planning their crimes. These are generally not crimes of passion. They are committed in the heat of the moment. Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris spent several months plotting their 1999 attack on Columbine High School. Dylan Roof allegedly plotted for 6 months prior to his attack in Charleston, South Carolina. Adam Lanza attempted to destroy the evidence of his plan to attack Sandy Hook, and the students there. But investigators uncovered the extensive research that he had done on mass murders in the months leading up to that accident. And while the nature of these crimes makes absolute prevention impossible, basically, there are, nevertheless, certain policy areas that deserve consideration. A large proportion of mass murderers and about 1/6 of ordinary, if you want to call them murderers, are mentally ill. Better care, treatments, stronger laws for civil commitment could prevent some of these crimes. The Tucson murder, Jared Launer, was expelled from Pima Community College because he was accurately found to be dangerously mentally ill. Unfortunately, there was no follow-up. The Aurora Theater murder, James Holmes, was reported by his psychiatrist to the University of Colorado threat assessment team because of his expressed thoughts about committing a mass murder. But once Holmes withdrew from the university, there was no follow-up. Newtown murderer Adam Lanza and his mother was aware of his antisocial malignancy and recklessly left her firearms accessible to him. There are, of course, competing interests involved when debating the curtailment of individual rights based on mental health screenings. Any involuntary commitment must respect the Constitution, which, as applied by the Supreme Court, requires proof by, quote, clear and convincing evidence, unquote, that the individual is a danger to himself or others in order for the person to be committed. Notwithstanding some similar traits among mass shooters, young, male, alienated, intelligence, it's important to remember that those traits are present in a great many young men who never harm anyone. It is also important not to stigmatize mental health treatment to such an extent that at-risk people, along with their relatives and friends, refuse to seek help for fear of the consequences. These are non-trivial considerations that must be weighed before any expansion of civil commitments, a civil commitment system. Better voluntary mental health treatment is expensive in the short run, but pays for itself in the long run through reduced criminal justice and imprisonment costs, not to mention reducing costs to the victims. I mean, we have just basically seen our society here in the U.S. now basically says, you know what? It doesn't matter if you're mentally ill. We're just going to have you run the streets. You can be homeless. You can be what? We're not going to do anything for you. And he says, unfortunately, misguided laws in recent years have made certain buildings vulnerable to psychopaths who, like Adam Lanza, would aim to kill as many people as possible before their effective resistance. By state law, Sandy Hook Elementary School was a gun-free zone. Yes, it was. The most dangerous place that you can be. The state forbids carrying guns at schools, even by responsible adults who have been issued a permit based on the government's determination that they have the good character and training to safely carry a firearm throughout the state. Thus, law-abiding adults were prohibited from protecting the children in their care, while an armed criminal could enter the school easily. Yep. Over the last 25 years, there have been at least 10 cases in which armed persons have stopped the incipient mass murder. Shawnee Restaurant in Alabama in 1991, Pearl High School in Mississippi, 1997, a middle school dance in Edinburgh, Pennsylvania, 1998, Appalachian School of Law in Virginia, 2002, Trolley Square Mall in Salt Lake City in 2007, New Life Church in Colorado, 2007, Players Bar and Grill in Nevada, 2008, Sullivan Central High School in Tennessee, 2010, Clackamas Mall in Oregon, 2012, just 3 days before Newtown, Mayan Place Theater in San Antonio, 2012 as well, 3 days after Newtown. And Sister Marie Lenahan Wellness Center in Darby, Pennsylvania in 2014. Gun prohibitionists insist that arming teachers or even armed school guards won't make a difference. But in the real world, they have, even at the Columbine shooting, where the armed school resource officer, a sheriff deputy in that case, was in the parking lot when the first shots were fired. The officer fired 2 long-distance shots and drove the killers off the school patio, saving the lives of some of the wounded students there. Unfortunately, however, the officer failed to pursue the killers into the building, and perhaps due to a now abandoned law and law enforcement doctrine of waiting for the SWAT team to arrive. The contrasts are striking and tragic, both at the very same time. The attempted massacre at the New Life Church in Colorado Springs was stopped by a private citizen with a gun. The massacre at South Carolina's Emmanuel AME wasn't. The mass murder at Pearl High School was stopped by a private citizen, the vice principal, with a gun. The mass murder at Newtown's elementary school wasn't stopped until the police arrived. The shootings at Appalachian Law School ended when private citizens, armed students, subdued the government. The shootings at Virginia Tech continued until the police arrived. More licensed carry laws that reduce the number of pretend gun-free zones are an effective way to save lives. We've done a podcast on gun-free zones, and you can go back and listen to that. Basically, gun-free zones are the most dangerous places you can be, and many of these gun-free zones are where our children are. So, what is used during murders? Okay, so let's take a look at this and see if we can maybe logically work our way through it. I don't know. Let's see. If you look up what murderers use, what kind of instruments do they use? Yes, they use guns. They also use sharp objects. Sharp objects are huge. Whether it be knives or whatever. Suffocation is something that's used by murderers. Blunt force. If you put those 3 together, it's then it comes out to about 10% of the time those things are being used. Not a gun. Those are being used. So, to this, that if that's true, and we're going off the same logic as those gun control advocates and gun banning advocates, this should mean that we should have knife control, right? How about rope and electrical cord control, or 2x4 baseball bats and pipe control? I mean, and you know how they love to say, if it saves one life, it's worth it, right? Well, we need to make sure that we ban all of those things. I mean, and they will bring up suicide and things like that too. Well, we have to ban guns because so many people are using them for suicide. So what is used during suicide? Well, hanging is almost 30%. Poisoning, it can be up to 32%, particularly amongst females. And cutting and jumping are also up to 9%. So again, we definitely need common sense rope, electrical cord, and belt control laws, right? How about lawn care and pest control? that would look kind of funny on a sticker, right? Lawn care and pest control. We are all for that. And you can't forget knife and building and even bridge control, right? We can't have people jumping off of bridges. We need to take all of those down. So another aspect of this, and this comes from ammo.com, and it's how many are used for self-defense. How many guns are used for self-defense? In March of 2025, just last year, studies indicated that there are 489,000 defensive gun use incidents annually. That's where the gun was actually used. However, studies consistently show as many as 2,500,000, so 2.5 million defensive gun uses per year. And what that means is maybe it wasn't fired, but the fact that somebody had one and they demonstrated the fact that they did, then that thwarted those violent crimes. The average yearly reported number of self-defense cases between 1990 and 2023 this is the average number, okay? 1,820,000 annually. That's the average. So Indiana passed stand your ground laws in 2006 and permitless carry legislation in 2022. In January of 2024, 14 of the 18 homicide investigations involved self-defense. From a domestic violence incident to a home break-in, over 3/4, 3 out of every 4 of all deaths in Indianapolis that month involved some type of self-defense claim. So, when you hear that the majority of homicides are committed with a firearm, just know that they are counting self-defense homicides as well. So, despite a 2022 study saying that the stand your ground legislation leads to more homicide, it's not true. It's just not true. If you look at the numbers, not true at all. The CDC does not differentiate between self-defense shootings and homicides. However, the evidence is clear. States with strong self-defense laws do not have higher homicide rates than those restricting the right of civilians to defend themselves. A 2021 study shows that states embracing civilians' rights to self-defense had little to no impact on violent crime rates. However, 75% of states that passed these stand your ground laws with no duty to retreat, experienced a decline in violent crime victimizations in the following years. So it did go down. So what I'm trying to say here is that this mantra, every time something comes up when it comes to an act of violence with a gun, of we need to ban guns, we need to have common sense restrictions, we need to have buyback programs, whatever. All it is they're trying to take away the guns, and that is only going to cause problems. It's only going to lead to deaths. There's no reason for it. It's not going to stop mass shootings. It's not going to bring down violent crime. It's not going to bring down murderers. It's not going to bring down accidental shootings. None of that. We have 1.5 guns per every American right now. We have millions of people with guns. And yet, that's all we hear every time. So I'd love to see what you think on it. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening. This podcast is a production of Organite Communications.